In today's video, we're going to start checkering the fuse strap, and I was contemplating whether or not I should checker the bump on the grip safety, and I've finally made a decision. I am going to checker it. So what I've done to try and basically make sure that my lines align is I'm going to use my horizontal or vertical jig, checkering jig. And I'm going to start actually checkering on this, on the bump of the grip safety first. Then I'm going to remove the grip safety and basically try to keep my file just as flat as it was when I was checkering the grip safety. I'll checker the rear of the mainspring housing, and hopefully the lines will align. Because right now it protrudes, I can't checker across both of them. So have to do it in bits and pieces. So right now I'm going to try to find where my file lays flat. Oh. So my jig wasn't as tight as it needed to be. I tightened it up and started checkering. And I think you've seen it before, where when you just start cutting those first couple of lines, that's really all you get. And in reality, that's all you need to take the jig off and continue cutting those lines using the first two as a guide. And now I'm going to check or try and actually make it pass just using those lines as a guide. They're very short. Those lines being that short is actually making using them as a guide very difficult. I had to basically constantly keep an eye on how my file was positioned, and I was using the side of the frame as a reference point. So I was just making sure that my file was staying parallel. Its side was staying parallel to the side of the frame. But it's doable. It's just, I'm warning you, if you're going to do this, it will be difficult if your bump is not actually flat with the mainspring housing. But in any case, I decided to take the beaver tail off, and because I needed to start checkering the mainspring housing. Now the jig goes back on. So because this is the same jig, it's the same frame, my expectation is that the lines will align. The lines I placed, the first lines I placed on the beaver tail will align with the first lines I place on the mainspring housing, as long as I keep the file flat on the jig. So the process here is exactly the same as what I just did on the beaver tail and what I did before on the front strap. And I think I've mentioned it before. The reason why I cut the vertical lines first is because once the horizontals are cut and verticals, if the verticals are not there yet, then it's going to be very hard to get this file to start moving. Basically, it'll start skipping over those horizontal lines, and it'll just be more difficult. So I like to start with verticals, just to kind of place them on the surface, and then go to horizontals, and then cut the verticals over the horizontals. My file was slipping all over the place. I think my hands are tired from yesterday, from you know, doing this yesterday. I'm holding onto the file with my thumbs, basically, or with my fingers, and I'm getting one just big blister right here. So it's ouchie time. You're probably noticing that I'm having a little bit of a difficulty removing the mainspring housing, and that's because when I cut the vertical lines over the seam between the frame and the mainspring housing, I actually placed a big burr in that seam, so that's why it was difficult to remove. Now what I'm going to do is position my horizontal line jig probably like this. Again, making sure that it's nice and flat. Touching, yeah. I'm going to snug it up pretty well. So the reason I placed the guide in this way is so that I can see both the beaver tail and the mainspring housing. And once I take the beaver tail off, I can start checkering on the mainspring housing without moving the guide. Alright, now that I've laid out some horizontal lines and went pretty deep on the beaver tail, I'm going to try and take it off. So now I'm going to start checkering on the mainspring housing itself. So cutting horizontal lines is actually my favorite part of checkering, and I think everybody will agree. They're much easier than vertical lines. Vertical lines are placed on the surface that's basically flat or straight. So that means that only a part of the file is working over a large surface area when you're cutting those long straight lines. When you're cutting across, the file is flat, the surface is rounded, so it makes very little contact and a lot of teeth past that contact spot, basically, wherever the file is. So you get a lot deeper, a lot quicker. Now that both vertical and horizontal lines are cut, it gets a little bit easier. At this point, the only thing that's needed is to start shaping those lines and start getting those pyramids. So as I'm cutting deeper, my lines are getting more and more pointed, more and more triangular, basically. And when both vertical and horizontal lines are looking perfectly pointed, that's when our pyramids are pointed. So that's basically all I need to do at this point. And once the mainspring housing and those parts of the frame are done, then I'll move on to the beaver tail again, just to shape those lines, make them pointed, and get those pyramids, basically. You're probably noticing that I'm using band-aids. It's a lot easier to grab onto that sharp file with something wrapped around your fingertips, simply because it is sharp and it is going to start getting some skin off, basically. So that's my advice to you. If you're going to be using a file like this, put some band-aids on. I think here it's a lot easier for you to see that that those lines are becoming sharp, and you actually are starting to see some pyramids forming quite nicely. Okay, now I need to clean up the burrs here. Let's see if the grip safety will fit. It seems to fit. Okay. The reason I cut the horizontal lines pretty deep first was because then there's a lot less material I need to remove when I'm cutting the verticals. Now I'm going to need to do the verticals. So this is where I started to get a little excited, simply because I was getting very close to being done, and my checkering was looking pretty good. I think better than what I've done in the past. I just need to dehorn the around the grip safety and clean up the frame. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm definitely going to need to clean up all around here for sure, because it's really sharp edges. Alright, so what I decided to do here is just use a file and kind of lightly break the edges of my checkering, just because it's going to be really painful on the hand, I think, if I leave them as is. I'll clean it up and show it to you a little bit better. So yeah, it came out pretty good. Alright, so here's the end result. As you can see, I rounded the bottom here a little bit. You can kind of see that step, which I may take care of later. But here's how the frame looks. Here's how that rear strap checkering looks. Let me zoom you in, see if I can show you higher detail. There we go. So here's how it came out. You can see that the lines do line up. I guess like that. No. Not sure. I think this is it. Yeah, that's how they line up. They also line up this way. Hopefully you can see that. So worked out pretty well.